All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with making the most of word work. So this PD, like all PDs we prepare and go through, supports our vision, mission, values, and our core priorities. And this one is really centered in priority 2, a culture of teaching and learning. So we're going to think about our teaching practices for phonics and think about best ways and tweaks that we can make to help our students maximize their learning. And in that way, we're providing a culture of access and inclusion. And we are planning with students at the center of our thinking, which of course increases our collective efficacy when we do it together. So just as a reminder, our norms are mute on entry. Your camera is on. Unless you have a problem with your camera, you can let Kristen know. And then please put your full name, your first and your last name on your screen. So if you are, named Mrs. So-and-so throughout the day, you'll want to just change it for the training so that payroll is really easy and you appear with your full name on the usage report when we turn that in for payroll. Use the chat. We're going to have some times where we unmute and can talk freely, but otherwise you'll want to use the chat. And if you have any questions, I'll just remind you to direct them to Kristen if you want to private chat her, and then we can talk about those questions at a certain stopping point. And then the agreement is that you're Zooming from campus and Zooming from the district office. And then I always appreciate your positivity and patience ahead of time. I feel like that's a norm everyone is very gracious with. So with that, I do want to remind everyone, this is the second grade word work session. So if you're looking for first grade, that is a different Zoom. And if you are looking for first grade, you could message Kristen and she could probably get that Zoom link for you and message you in the chat. So continuing on, I was asking Angie, a couple people that came in earlier. I remember at our last session, I did not finish, or was a few slides. So we're going to just do a little bit of catch up. I have a few things that I wanted to make sure that you got to hear about and think about before we get into the phonics section of the day. And so I put this slide up here just so you can kind of reflect on what we talked about last time. So we talked about phonological awareness and high frequency words last time. We talked about different strategies like having a movement when you're talking about segmenting. We talked about making sure you have rich print and language environments for your students with that phonological awareness. Phonemic awareness, focusing on the big two, segmenting and blending, making sure you kind of gamify it, keep it playful and short. We talked about high frequency words and some ways to introduce them, called flash words and heart words. Hearts with those parts that are maybe not known or irregular, and really talking about when you look at high frequency words, what is known, like the F, the sound in from is intact and the M is intact, but that O would kind of be a heart because it makes a different sound than what they expect. And then we showed you a quick video of the make it and break it for teaching new sight words, which was a great strategy to try. So those were some of the things that we talked about, but what we didn't get to was having a word wall. And so lots of us have word walls, and I've had different word walls up in my classrooms over the years, tried different things, as I'm sure you've had, but in reading about word walls, these are some of the best practices with word walls that we wanted to share with you. The first thing is, don't have a word wall, but do a word wall. And we said that because we just wanted to say do, but you do want to do the word wall. You don't just want it up in your room and just have it kind of be wallpaper on the wall. But the more you use it and the more students see that it's a tool for them and it's there for them and it's well organized and easy for them to access, they will be able to start using it as a tool to build their independence to access high frequency words and words with patterns, with phonics patterns that they can then use on their own. So one of the suggestions with doing a word wall is to do daily 5-minute kind of activities with your word wall, kind of gamifying, making it fun, but making it brief and daily. So here's a list of some things that you could try as you are thinking about how to use your word wall. And the framework, the ELA framework says that with high frequency words, you need to, we need to constantly be reviewing them. So we can't just do kind of a one and done, like here's our words for the week on the word wall, and we play with those words during the week, and we practice those new words during the week, and then we put them up on the wall, and then they just stay there, but we don't revisit or review them. So here's some different ways you can use your word wall to kind of gamify and play with those words and always have a review mixed in with new learning. So I'm just going to highlight a couple, but like one of my favorites is you pick a word on the word wall, you don't tell them what it is, and then you give them clues to guess it. So you might say, I'm thinking of a word, and my word has this many letters. And as I'm thinking of this, it has this many letters. Now, on this word wall that we made on this slide, you can see that there's this, they, then, sit, she, from, because, them, when, and who. So what might this word be? So kids might be looking at the word wall, thinking about what some of the words could be, and then maybe you give them a clue. The word has this letter in the middle of it. If you think you know what this word is, type it in the chat based on the words on my slide. Sit, that's right. So you could do like little games like that, guess my word, like with visual clues. You could also do an activity like this. I'm thinking of a word, and my word is going to complete the sentence. I want you to write in the chat what word I'm thinking of. Let me see. I want to go to my grandma's. I love her. I want to go to my grandma's because, oh, I just messed it up.
And that's what I would do.
That's what I would do too, Randy, like I just did. Okay, here's one more. Let's see. I am Bakersfield. I am Bakersfield. Which word do you think it could be? Yes, I am from Bakersfield, born and raised. So those are just a couple of quick ideas, and you probably have an idea that you could add here, or you might want to give clues that have meaning. I'm thinking of a word that is a synonym for girl or her. So that might be the word she. So those are some things that you can do that are just kind of a quick 5-minute engaging gaming with a word wall. So again, don't have a word wall, do a word wall. And then we wanted to just put some examples of word walls up. There's lots of different ways to do a word wall. It's like kind of like having a dictionary on the wall, but the best word walls are accessible. They're easy for the kids to see. They're well organized, and they sometimes word walls, they're words where they can come and get them and take them and then put them back. So there's lots of different ways to do a word wall. The one in the middle is an interesting one because that is a student created word wall. This is a 3rd grade class. And so these are words that they're curious about or want to know about. And so they created their own word wall that they add to and students use. So there's just some visual representations of word walls in different ways you might want to do it. So that was high frequency word support from last week. So this slide, we were thinking about how do you assess formally and informally, how do you assess for high frequency words? There's in the BAS assessment form book, there's those optional assessments. There's lists of high frequency words that you could test students on, like, you can kind of test them on maybe a segment of 5 or so and see what kind of monitor what they're taking on. One that I really love that you would probably do, not really at this point in the year, you might give this to someone that you're really concerned about in 2nd grade. But I think we talked about there's 13 words in most books that children are learning to read that take up 25% of the words that are on those printed pages. And here's that list, a great, quick, formative for you to see what high frequency words they really know is to dictate these words to them. So see which ones they know by giving them a quick dictation. And that can be really revealing about what high frequency words, basic high frequency words they have under their belt. Another way that you can, both formally and informally, formally with a BAS assessment, leveled reading assessment, you want to, when you're listening to your students or you're taking a BAS, pay attention to the high frequency words that are in the text that they're reading, and you want to notice, are they struggling through these high frequency words? Are these words that you thought were known to them, maybe in isolation, but are not known to them in text? So these are things that you can kind of pull out and get information from when you do a BAS, or anytime you listen to kids read and you feel like they're struggling with high frequency words. Pay attention as they listen to those, or they read those high frequency words out loud, and you can find out informally some good information. And then, of course, if they have a journal where they're writing any independent writing, this is such a treasure trove of informal assessment. You can really kind of see what they have control over in terms of high frequency words, what they're trying out, like that word they. And what they have pretty solid. So writing and reading are great informal and formal ways to assess high frequency word knowledge. And then just like with the phonological awareness, we had put together kind of like a suggested schedule that might be something that you would try. And we added a layer of that for high frequency words. So you may have your word wall up, and you might do on Monday 5 minutes of review, just words that are known that are on the word wall. Do some of those, do a quick game with that. And then maybe you're introducing new words that you want them to focus on and think about through the week. So that might be a little more time, maybe a 10 to 15 minute lesson where you're introducing high frequency words and then putting them on the wall. And then maybe another practice of those new, and then maybe practice new with a mix of review words, and then another 5 minute game where you're practicing a mix of new and review. So that's kind of a suggested schedule that you could think about. So then that kind of closes out what we were talking about last week with phonological awareness and high frequency words. And then we are going to go ahead and get started on the content for today, which is November 4th. So today we're talking about phonics and spelling in our word work series. After this, we're going to be on the 30th, we're going to be talking about text reading. And then finally in January for our last session, we're going to be talking about how to make the most of our BAS assessments when it comes to word study. So our intention for today is to really understand the role of phonics and spelling in a balanced literacy approach. So in our district, we've been doing a lot of work around this kind of orangey circle But this series, this training series, is all about this green circle here, the word work section of a balanced literacy day. And our success criteria, we know that when we feel more effective, efficient, and have some engaging strategies to try, we'll know we're going to feel pretty successful with that. So we had this slide last time. We talked about phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. So now it's all about phonics. So phonics is really taking these sounds, these awareness of sounds, and then putting it to a symbol. So it's all about now a sound symbol relationship that we want them to develop so they can recognize words. So they see the printed word, they say the sounds, and they can blend the sound, and they know that it refers to a word that has meaning. So when thinking about the process of blending or decoding versus encoding, we kind of wanted to spend just a minute of time talking about like what this means. And so when you decode, that's a blending process, a reading process in the service of reading. So when you are asking a child to blend sounds together, it's not a simple process. It's actually a complex thing that they have to engage in. First, they have to recognize the letter. So if I show them this word, and also if I'm asking them to blend it, I don't want to take away any of these processes here. So when I'm introducing a word for them to blend, the thing that I do not want to do is say, this is the word fine. Let's blend fine. Because when you say the word fine, and as a young teacher, I did this a lot. Here's the word fine. Let's blend the word fine. You just take away this complex thinking, this process that they need to build for themselves. So you want to have the word on a chart or in view, but this is the business that they need to do. This is the complex work that they need to do. So they need to recognize the letters, and they have to know the sound association. They have to understand how those sounds go together. So they have to understand that blending process. And then that when they are done blending, it creates speech, words that have meaning. So students see the letters and they have to figure out the word. So we don't want to tell them the word. We want them to go through that process. For encoding, that's the opposite. For encoding, they have to understand how sounds work to come together to form words. They have to take the word apart sound by sound. So encoding is when they want to write the word fine, they have to know that this stands for that sound. They have to know that this says the I sound, but they know enough about this to know that it doesn't say I on its own. And they've got to know that it's part of a larger pattern, that silent E. And then they have to know that they've got to string and blend the words back together to make sure that they've got the word they want to say. So encoding is that opposite process from decoding, where they have to say or hear the word, and they have to figure out the components of the word. So with each session, we're talking about best practices as we're reading and current research and thinking around phonics. So number one is teacher knowledge. And teacher knowledge is really so important when teaching phonics in a word study kind of system, because regardless of what program we're using, it's the teacher that has to make the decisions around what to do and when, and what's most beneficial to the students in front of them. So it's not just knowledge of phonics, but it's knowledge of students that makes this the number one best practice for phonics instruction. Because that's what drives your decision making when you are planning for the students that are in front of you. Scope and sequence. A best practice in phonics is to have a strong scope and sequence for skills that are being introduced. And every big box curriculum has a well laid out, research-based scope and sequence of phonics skills that are in the system. So your benchmark advanced, it does have a well laid out scope and sequence, and you really can use the resources that are there to make some decisions about how to make it even better for your students. But don't feel as though you need to change around any kind of scope and sequence or plan that scope and sequence on your own, because it's really laid out for you already. And then as far as routines go, high leverage instructional routines. Routines, when kids understand how to a really efficient routine for them to use when blending, that really takes a layer of multitasking off their plate. So they've got a good routine they can rely on, so they can just really concentrate on those skills that they're learning and putting those sounds together instead of thinking, oh, what do I do next? And which word or which sound or what am I trying to do? Also, not only do instructional routines help your student, but really when you think of a routine for yourself, it streamlines your teaching and it streamlines your planning as well. So it's really routines for teacher planning time and student time as well. And then build connections. A best practice in phonics is to make sure that you point out all the connections. So thinking about those phonemic awareness connections to like segmenting to encoding or writing, blending to blending words on the page. Also connections with high frequency words. What phonics components are consistent that can be connected to the high frequency words that they're learning or parts of those words they're learning. So thinking about connections and making those known and seen for students is a really solid best practice for phonics. And then finally, in it for the long haul approach. You know, when I was teaching first grade and second grade, at times I would, teach the current thing, and then I didn't recycle through it explicitly enough. So making sure that the new skill is cyclic and we continue to review and bring it forward. And my friend Kristen, when we were going over the notes for this, she was like, it's like an investment, like you're putting money in a 401k and you're going to keep revisiting it. And that's so true. So you're in it for the long haul approach, and you want to maintain like a cycle of review for things that have been taught. So going into talking about scope and sequence in phonics, and this is the scope and sequence that's also laid out in benchmark. I would say it's a similar scope and sequence that was in Pearson and Houghton Mifflin before that. But you can see here that there's a little key where the darker color kind of indicates like an expectation of mastery. Those would be our goals of mastery. And then the lighter shade of that same color is what would be expected to be introduced or just kind of approximated for children to kind of start playing around with and learning about. So you can see that for each grade level, how that corresponds down here at the bottom. And then for each of these kind of bars that go up, these are the different types or categories of patterns that are taught in the grades. So kindergarten is where they are learning about consonants and short vowels. And so that's really kind of doesn't even go, the expectation of mastery is not even all the way through, but that they have like a good foundation in understanding letter sounds and short vowels, consonant sounds and short vowels. And then really the approximation kind of goes through and up to digraphs. So short vowels, digraphs. First grade has a huge responsibility and a really big expectation with all of these. So they're solidifying everything from kindergarten, and then making sure that these things that were introduced in kindergarten are solidified and known. And then if you've ever taught first grade, you know about when this hits. So you start teaching the transitioning from a short vowel learning to a long vowel learning. That's always like hitting a brick wall. And that can really be a jump for our students. And then going on from final E, then you start to introduce the long vowels, are controlled, and diphthongs. And then in second grade, you're getting into those multisyllabic words. So this is kind of where second grade lives, really kind of solidifying those long vowel teams, are controlled and multisyllabic words. This year, of course, you might be finding that your range is kind of going this way a little bit more. So, so that this might be a little more fluid in terms of, you know, where you're starting and where you need to reach back to. So I did want to say before leaving this, I think this applies to us this year especially, and I'm sure in other years it definitely would apply to me as a second grade teacher. But one thing that when you're planning even for next year, or if this applies to you now with your kids, thinking about when there's a transition to these long vowels, especially thinking about final E patterns, I would say my advice would be not to wait. And when you're talking about short vowels, bringing them forward and kind of always drawing a comparison. Like if you're talking about short vowel I, bring like over a long vowel I and talk about how they're different and how they're the same, so that they just start to get used to and understand that there are different sounds for those letters, not with the expectation of mastery necessarily, but maybe at the beginning of second grade when you're kind of reviewing these short vowels. My recommendation would be to incorporate these on those in that learning as well, so that when you get there, it's not such a big jump for them to kind of adjust to. So that brings us to our sound spelling cards. So,
Right, Jen, sorry. We're
oh yeah, no, go
at
ahead,
our
Kristen.
30-minute mark.
Thank you. I love that you're giving me reminders, because I would not be looking at the clock. So these are the sound spelling cards that come from Benchmark Advance, and you all have a copy of these. Just a few things to say about these reminders, and I'm sure these are also things that are already known to you, but for people who maybe have less experience teaching phonics to people who have lots of experience teaching phonics, these are some good reminders to talk about. So sound spelling cards are not an alphabet chart. So it's not promoting like an alphabet chart. It's promoting a system of symbol and sound. So I don't think it really matters the type of sound spelling representations that are posted in the class. Like you might like the sound spelling cards from our Houghton Mifflin series better. I don't really know that matters. What matters is that the system you have up in your room that's going to help your kids anchor and be able to be independent with discovering sounds they need to, maybe they want to write in a word. They need to have it anchored to a representation that makes sense. So for example, if you have an alphabet chart up in your room that maybe you've gotten that's super cute and it's like from Teachers Pay Teachers, but the letter O is represented with orange, that is not a sound spelling chart. That's an example of an alphabet chart. And because an orange doesn't represent short vowel sound O, it represents an R controlled. That's not the same as having this type of system up in your room. So a couple things to just review with sound spelling cards is that each sound, there are continuous sounds and there are stop sounds. So continuous sounds are when you can hold or extend the sound, and a stop sound is when it like stops abruptly in your mouth and you cannot sustain the sound. When you look at some of these sound spellings, some of them they can be tricky and we can kind of get in a rut with them. And some of these sound spelling cards are not my favorite. Like inch, for example. What does everyone want to say? Ruler. So that can be quite confusing. Another one that's weird is the one for W. Everyone wants to say it's a kangaroo, but it's a wallaby because we've got lots of wallabies in America. So those are some that are kind of ones that you want to, if you use this sound spelling system in your room, you'll want to make sure that you review and that those titles, those pictures are really carefully laid out for your students so they don't have confusion. And then when you're teaching students to articulate a sound, you're introducing a sound spelling, you also want to make sure that your articulation is nice and clear and that we're not adding the sound, especially with stop sounds. That's a very easy thing to do, like it with the sound for bicycle, because it's a stop sound. It's really easy to add the on the end and say ba. But when you're teaching those sound articulations, you're teaching that sound spelling for the first time, you want to clip it out of your mouth so that you do not add that sound on as much as possible. So I'm going to just go through the first line. So a, b, k, d, e, f, g, I. So looking at the second line, just say those to yourself. And I'm going to give you a little heads up on that rabbit. It's got to sound like your teeth are clenched and the sound's coming out. It's not with your jaw open. It's So go ahead and say those sounds to yourself. And as you're saying them, think about which ones are continuous. There are 4. And type them in the chat when you're done. So once you've finished articulating that second row to yourself, put in the chat which ones you think are continuous. Yep, Sarah and Sandra said L for lemon, you can sustain it. M for map, N for nest, and R for rabbit. Those are all continuous sounds that you can sustain. And the others are stop sounds. So those are the ones you got to clip that off of. Okay. So these should be up on a wall or something similar that can give kids an aid for figuring out, aw, you're right, Alyssa, aw for octopus. There's 5. So because short vowels are sustained sounds. So this chart I wanted to put up here because then we have, in second and in first grade, we have these other cards. And so these are, again, sound spelling representations. So there's an anchor that helps us remember the sound, a word that helps us remember, and then the spelling. And some of them have multiple ways to spell. So that's where we get the sound spelling from. These are grouped by type. So these are consonant digraphs. And I would encourage you to group them in your room in a similar way so that kids get the idea of like this system of organization. Long vowels are grouped together. Vowel digraphs, where 2 letters come together to make one vowel sound. And then the R-controlled cards. The cards that we did not put up here that I don't think are really worth posting in your room are consonant blends. And consonant blends, I don't necessarily think they have to be posted in your room because consonant blends have 2 sounds that are maintained within the blend. So ooh. Those two sounds are unique and can be heard. They're blended together. It's difficult to hear, but I know lots of us have really limited wall space. Raise your hand if you do. So you have really limited wall space. Those blends, I would say if wall space is precious, it's not something that you want to give wall space to. So, that's just kind of a review of sound spelling cards and why they can be helpful. And the more we refer to these, of course, the more our students see them as tools that they can use, and they will start using them independently for themselves. So with those sound spelling cards, you want to routinize your introduction to make it nice and simple. It also keeps it nice and simple for you when you're teaching. So in second grade, you have the sound spelling card and you also have freeze cards. And I have not taught in the classroom with this series. Oh, no, wait, did I? Yes, I did. Sorry. I did teach in the classroom with this series. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. That was Pearson my last year in the classroom for second grade and third. So, but in this series, you have this freeze card that has representations of each spelling and a picture that goes with them. And then you have the sound spelling card. And as I was thinking about this, I thought I could see where I might use these two in conjunction. And maybe after the meeting, if any of you have used them both in conjunction, and you can tell me if it's helpful or not. But when you introduce a new sound, you want to use your sound spelling, whatever sound spelling you have got, and you want to make it a routine for you and for the kids. So in introducing the sound spelling card, there is I think in the in benchmark in the routine section of the phonics book, there is a suggested routine. And I don't know that it matters that you follow their routine. I think it just matters that you have one and it's consistent. And so my routine is I like to make it simple for myself. And I just kind of read almost down the card. So these are prompts for me to kind of talk through each thing as I'm introducing the sound spelling. So you might start by saying, what do you notice about this card? You might get a couple quick shares, and then you might start by introducing it by saying, well, this is the long I card, and this is a picture of pie. Can you say pie? Pie. The vowel sound we hear in pie is long I, pie. There are 5 different ways we have to spell the sound I in a word. I by itself, Y at the end, I with consonant E, IGH, and IE. So that might be a way that you routinize it. So that's less than a minute of an introduction. And then when I was thinking about these freeze cards and how I might use it, I could see where I might then pull up the freeze card and say, some of these spellings are on our freeze card. Pie has IE, fly has the Y at the end of a word, child has I on its own, and night has IGH in the middle. This could be helpful, I think, in just showing kids where those patterns land in words. So I don't know. That was something that I was thinking about as I was planning this. I could see using these kind of in conjunction with each other. But I think the important thing in a sound spelling is to make sure you have your routine so that's nice and consistent for the kids. And then you'll see that I have this chart. So this is something that you would want to introduce your new skill and your spelling patterns before you start doing some work with blending. And we're going to talk about this chart in just a minute. So this is, when I looked at the patterns of instruction in benchmark, this is your weekly pattern as it appears in benchmark. And again, benchmark has everything in it that it should have as far as a phonics program. The complaints that I hear is that there's not enough, there's not enough words to practice with. I've heard the decodables that are provided are those passages. I've heard so So we're going to talk about what decisions you can make around what you've got and to elevate it and make it a better match, maybe in some places for your kids. But some of the patterns are, they always start on Monday, introducing the sound spelling correspondence. There's always an opportunity for blending. Then they give a spelling pretest with words. And then they include high frequency words within the phonics block, and that's very consistent every day. And then there's always a spelling activity every day. On the second day, there's always a decodable. And then there's a multisyllabic lesson, usually on a Thursday on day 4. And then on day 5, there's always a build words, and then you're reviewing multisyllabic. You reread the decodable for fluency, and then you have a spelling post test. So when I was looking at that pattern, and then I imagined I imagined a group of students that I felt was pretty typical for me when I taught 2nd grade, you know, and where I think they would be or what I would be doing with them. So these are some adjustments that I made. So I did say I am going to introduce the sound spelling card, but on the sound spelling card, oh, and I should tell you that the week that I chose to work from was Unit 2, Week 3. So some of you have probably already gone past that. It's like long vowel I in your focus, and some of you may not have come to it yet. But I didn't, thinking of a typical 2nd grade class, I wouldn't think that they could handle all these spellings at once. So I made the decision to separate them out. So I'm going to focus on the I, G, H, and I by itself, and then do a simple dictation of 4 words in a simple sentence. And that's going to be my 20-minute Monday. And then on Tuesday, I'm going to review my same card, but this time we're going to focus on 2 additional spellings, I-E, and then I consonant E. We're going to review words, and then we're going to do a building words routine. So it's not incredibly dissimilar, but it's different because I'm making decisions around what I think would be best for my kids and most accessible. Then I am going to talk to you about a blending chart. I think this will remedy that idea that there's not enough words to practice with. And then I'm going to look for a decodable. Now, one thing that I don't love, I don't know how you guys feel about it, are the decodable passages in 2nd grade. I don't love them. And so when I went and I looked in 1st grade, and I mean, I think this is kosher, be fine for me, because you have access to all of those things in 1st grade. And I could see like assigning that electronically, maybe, because I don't want to necessarily print all those, but I could see assigning a long I book from 1st grade electronically, have them read it, and then that might be a Google Classroom assignment. Some of you might really like those decodable passages, and they might be better for certain kids in your class. They're almost more of like an article type of setup. So that was one thing that I was thinking that I might try to play around with and change if I were teaching. And then on Wednesday, we'll do a closed sort. Thursday, we're going to play a little word awareness game, do more of our blending chart, do a word building, and then we're going to read the decodable again. And then on Friday, reread that blending chart. They're going to work on the decodable independently. We're going to have an open sort, and then I'm going to do a dictation rather than a spelling test. So we're going to talk about some of these things that are in my weekly pattern and how they look. So the first is blending. So for blending is just, it's an on-ramp to decoding words. And so we're going to talk about how we can make that nice and efficient for ourselves and for our kids. And in your series, and many of you there's so many people in here, there's such a wide variety of experience. There's people that have taught for over 20 years and people that have taught for less than 5. And so what I think is interesting in Benchmark is when you look at their routines that are available to you, they only include one blending routine. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, but really there's different types of blending routines. So we wanted to talk about 4 of them here because there are routines that serve different purposes that you can teach kids. And there are some routines that work better with certain kids than others. So we're going to practice some routines, 4 of these routines. And the first one is called continuous blending, which is probably what you're most familiar with. So continuous blending is, you have a list of CVC words or words, any words, on a chart. And the blending routine is you're pointing, saying the sound, saying the sound, saying the sound, and then saying it all together, saying the sounds all together. It usually is best with words that have an initial continuous blend sound. Makes it easy to begin using this continuous blending. And this is when you would use it with students. This is a routine that is best used with students that already kind of articulate sounds efficiently. They can hold a memory sequence of sounds in their mind, and they have a pretty well-developed sense of phonemic awareness. So the continuous blending routine sounds like this. Mop, add, pad, ed, sled, fast. So it's pretty straightforward. Now, I bet lots of you have had students where if you teach them the continuous blending routine, they might, this is what they might do. Pickle, because they don't have this really important skill. They cannot hold a sequence of memory of the sounds. So this continuous blending routine may not be the blending routine for them. It may be, this is a very efficient blending routine for kids who already have a strong sense of these things. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is called cumulative blending. And cumulative blending is when your chart or your whiteboard is blank, it begins blank. And each spelling of the word is written from left to right. And you say the sound, add another sound, then blend just that chunk, add another sound, and then blend that together. And then this is such a strong strategy to use when students have difficulty holding that sequence in memory. And they just need more support with blending sounds together because it constantly is taking them back to the beginning and blend again, back to the beginning and blend again. So that's what this sounds like and looks like. It looks like this. Sound, sound, blend, sound, g, blend, rug, rug. Okay, here's one more. Sound, sound, blend, sound, blend, sound, blend, sled. So that's another routine that might be more supportive of kids that have a hard time holding that sound sequence in their memory. So now what we're going to do is we're going to give you about 3 minutes in a breakout. And Kristen is going to cut and paste some words that you can practice with. So I'm going to put you into partner teams, or there might be a couple triad teams, but we're going to give you some words to try the continuous blending. We're going to give you some words to try the cumulative blending. And I'd like you to take turns to just kind of practice being the teacher and practice being the student. And we'll send you to breakouts for just about 3 minutes. So before I go, were there any questions about that? Okay, let's see. So we have about 28 participants minus me and Kristen, that's 26. So I'm going to create 13 breakout rooms and assign you automatically. Okay, so and just a second, let me fix a couple things. So when you go in, just introduce yourselves, and then you should hopefully see those words in the chat. Take turns doing the continuous blending and the more supportive cumulative blending. All right, here you go.
All right, friend. How are you feeling?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm gonna move Elizabeth Petrini to room 11.
Oh, okay.
And see if anyone else is alone.
I'm not in a classroom. I'm with a specialist in CNI.
I think everyone else is good.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're welcome
Okay.
to practice if you like.
You are at,
Do you wanna, oh, go ahead and tell me, what am I at?
it is like 4:10 right now. So we got about 35 minutes left.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go ahead and broadcast the message, and I'm gonna put the words out. I put it in the chat. Oh shoot. Okay.
You wanna pause our recording?
Are you in full?
Oh shoot.
Hang on, wait, let me see if I can do it. Hang on. Pause Zoom recording.
Okay, thank you.
You're
I'm sorry,
welcome.
I feel bad
No.
that I dropped off. I was talking to them. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Sorry to
That
my
was
partner.
really, it was just a really brief practice.
Okay.
So those were just those two, continuous and cumulative. And I said that there were 4. Here's the next one. So vowel first blending, I think this really comes into play when we're talking about 2nd grade and where we're at right now. Vowel first blending is when you give attention to the digraph of the vowel sound, the vowel digraph or the vowel sound first, and then you read the word. So you would use this blending strategy when students are learning about vowel teams, or any letter combination for any single sound. So it would look like this. You would have the words on chart, pre-made. You may underline or call attention to the vowel team or the vowel pattern. So you would start by saying sound, a, blend, take. Vowel is e, blend, leaf. The vowel oo, spoon, ow, ground. So it's just looking at the vowel team first, getting the kids to say that sound first, and then going back and blending. The final one is multisyllabic blending, and that looks like this. So you're going to have your words on a chart, and you're going to use a card to cover and reveal one syllable at a time. If you've created an anchor chart that talks about closed syllables and open syllables, you'll want to have that off to the side to kind of talk about that as well. But you're going to cue the students just by showing one syllable at a time. So we're going to blend the syllable, ass, bass, et, ket, bass, ket, basket. You might want to have a conversation about how this is closed. It's a consonant, vowel, consonant, syllable. This is closed. It's a consonant, vowel, consonant, syllable. But you're kind of taking that difficulty off, seeing those parts of the word by covering the syllable. So wish, ing, wishing, table, table. And here you can again have a conversation. Would it be table or table? So about those open and closed syllables. So I'm going to give you, we're going to give you just a couple more minutes in your breakouts to practice. And if I think Kristen is going to do that again, where she copies and pastes and we broadcast out those lists. So we're going to give you just a couple more minutes with your teacher partner and have you practice the vowel first and multisyllabic blending. Okay, ready? Go. Okay. So I think our breakout rooms are going to be closed in about 3 seconds.
Yep.
All right, it looks like everybody's back. I know that was really, really brief, but we just wanted to make sure that you knew about those 4 types of blending routines. And then if you see down here, it says link to all 4 blending routines. That'll take you to a page where they are all on the same page, and you can print that out if that would be helpful to you to just keep in your planner to kind of remind you of when and whom you might use it with. So there's that for you, linked down here. And then we're going to go on to talking about making the most of blending. And this book is a book that the ELA team upstairs have been reading, and it's been really a good read so far, but it's called A Fresh Look at Phonics by Wiley Blevins. And he talks about how you can use, he calls these like line charts or blending charts. And he talks about how important it is to think about these in a way that you can differentiate them with children. And when I first saw these in his book, I thought, oh, this is like a RAN board, but it's actually not a RAN board. A RAN board is like a rapid automatic naming board where the kids are practicing going lit, light, my, why, Tim, time. So, and then it's repeated over and over again. This is actually a teaching tool. And I think this gets to the concern where Benchmark doesn't have enough words to practice with. This is a way that you can make your own chart that you will be using throughout the week. And he makes recommendations on how you would construct it and how to differentiate it. And that's what I love. That's another thing that kind of would routinize it for me too, when I'm creating it and planning to make it more simple for me. So he always says the first line of any blending board should connect the new to known. So kids know, they know a short vowel sound for I, but but we're learning this I pattern, long I. So we're gonna combine and compare these in the first line. My is probably a known word. Y might be one that they're not quite sure about. It's got that I sound at the end. They probably know that short vowel for Tim. This is how it changes it when you add. So this is, the first line is new to known. The next lines, you should create a line, he suggests, for each new spelling pattern or phonics pattern that you're learning with the skill that week. So this week has 5 different spelling patterns. I didn't do 5 different lines, but I kind of combined. So here's a line with IGH. Here's some practice with I on its own. And then here's practice with IE. And then he says the next line should be mixed set of target skills. So I on its own, IGH mixed in. And then the next is another, I think he suggested another mixed set of target skill. And I did that again. So there's 2 mixed skill sets and then review words for mastery. And I put a word here that has an E sound at the end because that's an opportunity for comparing this I in my and this E in funny. Why are they different? What do you notice? And then he suggests a row of challenge words, and then he suggests ending it with a couple lines of connected text, so putting it in a sentence. And what I love about this are his suggestions. He says, this might be something that you read after introducing a new phonics skill. You can provide, you may chorally read this together the first day, and then in subsequent days after that, ask for different groups of kids to read different things. So you might have the whole class read the new to known and all the blue lines because they're the new skill, but then ask maybe a couple kids to volunteer to read that purple and that pink, the mixed practice. It can help you inform you about what kids are taking on and how they're feeling more confident with these patterns and how it's kind of becoming cemented in their minds. So I made that chart. It's up here behind me, and here's a screenshot of it on the wall. But I think this really also gets to that problem with benchmark of not having enough practice. This is what I would use and have up on the wall, and it would be there all week. And this is what we would kind of open with and warm up with. So we wanted to share that strategy with you. It's on page 38 of his book. It's a good chapter about blending and how this can be a great tool for you. So moving up from decoding to encoding or dictation and word building. So this is kind of when we're talking about spelling, and we have some strategies that we kind of pulled that we thought were kind of fun ones to try. So the first thing is we just wanted to say a word about dictation, like what it is. So dictation is that process of encoding. A word is said to the child, they have to identify the sound, know what letter it goes with, and write it down. There is a spelling dictation routine in your series, but when you read it, we're not going to take a minute to read it right now, but when you read it, we felt it was a little laborious and kind of clunky. So when you're thinking about a dictation routine, what we would just encourage you to make sure that you have is use it as an opportunity to call attention to your sound spelling cards, because you want to bring those in as much as you can to train your kids to use them as well. So if I were going to, I don't have them on my wall behind me, but if I pretended this is in my classroom and you were my students, I would be able to, if I wanted to dictate a word, let's see, if I wanted to dictate a word to you to spell, I might say, hey, boys and girls, we're going to write the word night. Say night. And you would want to incorporate whatever your segmenting routines are from your phonological awareness section. So then you would call attention. Yep, that's like on the night card, right? And then kids would write it. And then let's say the second sound, I. Ooh, we're going to look over here on our wall at our long vowel sound. I hear I like in pie. So let's look at this I card. Now this is tricky because there's 5 different ways to spell I. So this might be an opportunity where you say, okay, so we know that we've got we need to figure out how to spell this I. In our practice spot down here, let's try a couple different ways. Let's try I by itself. I. Does that look right? How about I, E, night? How about I, G, H, T? Let's So that is a conversation that could be had, and it's one idea for how, when you have multiple spellings and they're just learning, it might be something you just say, IGH goes here, and then if it's something that is known or familiar and you're dictating, you might go through a little process like this, looking and trying out different spellings, so it kind of triggers what looks right for them. So dictation can be done at any time. It doesn't have to be a spelling test, but that is a great, really helps them synthesize those sounds and develop that reciprocity between the reading and writing that we want to develop. So if I go back into my presentation and we look at this. So at this point, I am gonna stop sharing my screen, and you're gonna need a whiteboard and a marker because we're gonna do a little word building activity. So I know that Abigail had said, I'm really kind of concerned about spelling. So if you are having kind of a concern about kids and their developing spelling skills, these word building activities are efficient, they're gamey, and they're quick, especially if you do them with a whiteboard and a marker. Ideally, what would be super awesome if you were in a small group, if you did it with something that was more hands-on, like magnets or letter cards or something like that. But we don't have lots of time sometimes to organize those things, and especially in a whole group setting. Here's something you can do to make it quick and kind of gamey. So this is just called word building or chaining. So I'm gonna give you two different kinds of routines, and we're gonna talk, I want you to think about how they are, what it's asking kids to do that's different when we transition to the second routine. So the first routine, you might say this: use the letters P-I-E to spell your first word. Show me. What's the word? Hi. You can just say it to yourself in your classroom. Okay, now change the P to T. What's the word? Hi, I can see Paige saying it. Thanks, Paige. Now add a D to the end. What's the new word? Tide. Okay, now add an R after the T. What's the new word? Yes, Marianne, tried. Okay, so that's giving them a letter, asking them to make a change, and ask what's the new word. Okay, so that's routine one. Okay, now we're gonna switch to a different routine. So I want you to kind of erase your board and just start with that word tried that we left off with. Tried. Okay. Now this routine is a little different. See if you can see how it's different. Okay, make tried say spied. What will you change? And they would say, I'm going to change TR to SP. Now make spy. Now make spied say spy. What will you change? So they have to think about what they're going to change. Spied to spy. What will they change? The IED to Y. And finally, now make spy say sky. What will you change? You're going to change the P to K. Okay. So that's an example of an activity that you can do. It's pretty quick. You would make up whatever your own rules in the train that you're doing something that's accessible and doable for your kids, but it's giving them that quick multiple opportunities for practice and paying attention to position of sounds and words and how they change, are similar and dissimilar. Okay. So then I'm going to share my screen again. And now we're going to move into some activities called word awareness activities. So word awareness activities are really, it's about kind of exploring words and giving kids time to think about words. This is where I think you can give them an opportunity to think about those larger chunks in words and look at bigger pieces of words and call attention, because our struggling students, the things that they notice about words is like, it starts with a W or it starts with an A, and they notice the most simple pieces of information in a word. But doing word awareness activities can help them understand the larger parts and larger patterns of the word and how they work. Okay, so if you use any of our math units that our math department has created, they have something, an activity, a number activity, concept activity that's called Which One Doesn't Belong, and we ripped it off and we put words there instead. So which one doesn't belong? You can write in the chat or unmute and tell us, which one do you think doesn't belong? Flip doesn't belong. Okay, who wants to unmute and say why they think, because someone said mop, someone said plot. So someone unmute and tell us why.
Plot doesn't end in P.
Plot does not end in P. That's right, Angie. So plot doesn't belong. Okay, who else had something else that doesn't belong?
Flip doesn't belong because it has a short I as opposed to a short O.
Flip doesn't belong because of that vowel. What else?
Mop doesn't have a blend at the beginning.
Mop doesn't have a blend at the beginning or any kind of two-letter combination, consonant combination.
Mop is a three-letter word. All the rest are four.
Right, all the rest are four. So you can see where if you put something like this up on your board and you just ask kids that simple question, like sometimes they'll go right to something like, oh, this only has three letters, or maybe they'll say, they'll all kind of notice the same thing, but then kids will start to notice different things. And it is a great 3-minute conversation that is just a really quick, efficient way for kids to justify, like it's revealing to you, what are they noticing about words? Are they noticing these little parts? Are they noticing like a larger part or something really sophisticated like a change in vowel? So this is such a great activity to maybe put in your phonics toolbox once a week, to put it up on the board and have that conversation. Okay, so another word awareness strategy that we wanted to share with you is word ladders. And if you taught summer school, we put some word ladders in the ELA curriculum for 1st and 2nd grade. So this might look familiar, or some of you have probably used these before. But word ladders are another great word awareness activity that kind of supports spelling and noticing parts in words. So you can, on your whiteboard, make a ladder. So you can make a ladder with 6 rungs. So that would look like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And put the word like at the top. Okay. You ready for this word ladder? Okay, for this rung, take away the K. Okay, take away the IE and change to IGHT, IGHT. Change the L to M. And of course, with each one of these, you'd ask the kids, what's the word? Change the IT in might to I'll. What's the word? Add an S to the beginning. What's the word? Add a D to the end. What's the word? Okay. So that's a quick example of a word ladder. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen again.
And
And
we have about 5 minutes left. 5 minutes.
thank you. Let me see. Let me get to my screen sharing. These are some examples of word ladders and how different teachers do them. And what is a really fun suggestion as they understand how to do them, they can even create their own and they can give them to friends to do. So they can create their own clues. You can put picture clues there for them to change the word ladder. You can put meaning clues there to kind of help them complete the ladder. And so they can be teacher created and eventually they could be student created and shared with each other. And then if you want to try this, there's a template at the top that you can click on and you could print or laminate it or put it in a little sheet protector for them to kind of play around with and for you to play around with them. So I would use it as a teaching tool first, and then it can transition to a UA activity as they understand how to do that. And then another strategy that we want to talk about is sorts. People use sorts. We see lots of sorts everywhere. But what we want to ask you to think about is to up your sorting game. So there's closed sorts and open sorts. And closed sorts are when you determine the topic for the child or you determine the categories. And an open sort is when the child determines the categories. So these are examples of closed sorts or modified closed sorts. Like this is a little more open because there's nothing the child has to determine how they're going to categorize. But we would also say not just looking at sorting print, but looking at picture and sorting pictures by sound, by vowel sound. Try opening up your sorts, make it a little more open or give them words and say, how would you sort these? And then something that I think is such a great thing to do that I never thought of is just at the end, bring everyone back together with their sort and say, okay, you guys sorted all these long A, short A words, but where would I put the word have? So give them one to really think about and discuss to kind of sum up their thinking and challenge that sort. Like where would have lived for them? So that's those are some strategies that you can try to bring about word awareness and that will help them pay more attention to the details, large and small, in words. And then, of course, connecting to reading and writing, continuing to reinforce that relationship between reading and writing. So looking for evidence of what you're currently teaching in their writing, giving them connected text to read with the task, the skill that you're currently working on. The more connected we make the things that we're giving them to do, the better able they're to cement new learning and figure that out and make it permanent in their mind. So we also put in this schedule. So this is kind of like an accumulation now. Here's the phonological awareness. Here's the high frequency word. And here's the phonics and spelling that might add to your word study block. So this is kind of now like one big word study block. And as kids understand how to do things independently, you can move things into their universal access time and think about different ways to do that. And then one last thing I would ask you to consider, and I know we have 1 minute left, but is when you're thinking about assessment, I'd love to challenge you to rethink the way that you assess your kids at the end of the week in a spelling test, a traditional spelling test. And here's just a few ways to think about it. So when we give kids a list of words to learn in the short term, it just sits in their frontal lobe and it doesn't go, it leaves, it evaporates at the end of that week. But if we do some things that kind of cement things a little bit better for them and give them a test that kind of really challenges their ability to use the patterns that they have learned in new and novel ways, that can make that learning really stick. So consider opening your spelling test by saying, write any 2 4-letter words you know, or any word that has IGHT that you know. Angie, I see you. It wouldn't work in middle school, would it, Kristen? And then you might give them a dictation of like maybe 4 words from a list that you have them study. Write the word this, write this one, write this one, write this one. And then maybe take one of those words. Now write a word that rhymes with it. Now write 3 sounds you know with the I sound, the long I sound, or 3 words you know with the I sound. So consider opening up your spelling test and giving them a little challenge that kind of cements their learning a little more. And then of course with assessment, anytime you're reading, noticing that new learning and how they're reading words with those patterns, looking at their writing, noticing how they're able to apply the new patterns you're teaching them, gives you an indication on what's happening inside their mind. We are going to stop right there and we're going to save these pitfalls to open up our next session when we come back together for text reading. But as I save that, and we will put this up at the next, but hopefully we've met our learning intention for you about how the role of phonics works in a balanced literacy approach, and that you're feeling like you've gotten some effective, efficient, engaging strategies to try. And as Kristen puts up the the evaluation, I'm just going to read this as you're filling out your evaluation. When you're done with your evaluation, you don't even have to say goodbye. You can just walk out because I know we're over time. But Wiley Blevins says in his book, sometimes there's such a focus on phonics instruction, especially with struggling readers, that their vocabulary, background knowledge, and general comprehension needs are not being met. I've worked with districts in which the entire response to intervention time for struggling readers is solely devoted to phonics. I get it. Students lack these skills. They are easily measured and progress can be shown more readily. However, these students need tons of vocabulary and background knowledge building. This work is what plants and waters the seeds of comprehension, especially in the later grades. To not have a more balanced approach with these students is a serious flaw that will perpetuate many of the reading issues they face. And we just wanted to leave you with that, because as you think about your phonics and your word study, we're going to be talking about text reading and how critical it is that we just are not teaching words in isolation or on a list, but we're always connecting them back into text so that they can kind of grow their schema for understanding words and their world. So as you're finishing up your evaluation, thank you for your patience and positivity, and we will start at 3:15 on November 30th. Rebecca, right, Kristen? Kristen's saying yes. And we will start by reviewing pitfalls for phonics and spelling instruction, and then we'll go into our content for text reading. So we will see you on November 30th. Thank you guys for hanging in there with us and for attending. Bye, Alicia. Bye, Leslie. Thank you guys. Bye, Lindsay. Bye, Holly. Thank you, Marianne. Bye, Susan, Katie.